Hey everyone, I'm Jack. And I'm Alex. And in today's video, we'll be going over the levels of BioShock from worst to best. BioShock has been a favorite of Alex and I since I can honestly remember, and after countless playthroughs we finally smartened up and decided on covering it. The 9 levels within are, for the most part, incredibly diverse in structure, thematic elements, and characters, and because of this, this was a very difficult list to decide on. So, how do the levels of BioShock compare? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, our patrons! Lest I forget our lovely patrons who voted on BioShock as the bi-monthly video. If you want to have a direct say in the content we make, subscribe from the link in the description. We appreciate you all, and without further ado, let's get into the ranking.
Number 9, Apollo Square. BioShock is at its best when it's got you running around a visually striking environment and interacting with the setting in interesting ways, coming across memorable characters. Apollo Square has you slouching through a creatively barren slum where the most noteworthy occurrence is being serenaded by Frank Fontaine's jeering, health-lowering sleeper agent codes. It wasn't nearly as frustrating as I remembered because the health decrease is pretty negligible, but it never feels good having your max health lowered in any game. Looking at you, Demon Souls, you sack of shit. This level, as Jack and I both independently noted, feels like Olympus Heights but worse, and I'm not talking about it in the literal in-game sense. Just because the residents of Apollo Square were suffering in squalor doesn't mean I should have to join in the fun, but here we are. You can mask shitty gameplay with cool set pieces or interesting characters in a game like this, and it'll go over better than it does in most other genres, but they just left Apollo Square high and dry with no hope for escaping the bottom seed. Aesthetically, it's as mind-numbing as the game's morality system. You've spent about 80% of the game wandering through underwater cities, man-made forests, and enormous power stations. What on earth were they thinking chasing that stuff with this generic cityscape? Following those up with this is like being served a 5-course Michelin-starred meal and then capping it off with a plate of Spam and hardtack. If I wanted to look at something like this, I'd drive into DC and walk 10 minutes in any direction away from Capitol Hill. As for the characters, you've already met everyone of importance in the game by now, so it's just the same old, same old. Fontaine has a lot less charisma than Atlas, and I don't just mean it in the sense that he's a jackass. He's repetitive and droning in every scene after the one where he betrays you in Rapture Central Control. All in all, the level is passable thanks to BioShock's generally fun-based gameplay, but this is the game at its most bare bones and relentlessly uninteresting. I can think of about 8 places I'd rather be than here getting my phone blown up by Fontaine begging for a second date at Point Prometheus.
Number 8, Welcome to Rapture. Maybe we're lowballing Welcome to Rapture because we've both played through this game countless times and it's lost its intriguingly haunting charm, but unfortunately by the nature of general game design, the introduction is the slowest and simplest level BioShock has to offer. Writing this segment is very difficult for me, because on the one hand I'd argue this is the most compelling beginning to a game ever, but I've also played it so many times that I can pretty much do a frame-by-frame rerun of the entire cutscene in my head at any given time. That isn't to say I don't enjoy this though. The mystery of the plane crash and the beauty of the exterior of Rapture does muster up intrigue no matter how many times you see it. So, what are my thoughts? I don't really know. Welcome to Rapture is very much a business cycle of experiences in my mind. You first crash land off a plane into the ocean and miraculously float your way into a Babylonian-esque underwater society, which is great. However, anything not exclusively story-related is where Welcome to Rapture falls short. It isn't very visually distinguishable once you are inside the city, and to reiterate, during this run-through, anything not related to world establishment felt surprisingly forgettable. Once again, this isn't me dismissing this for what it is, it's still pretty much a spotless introduction on all fronts and exacts in what it sets out to do. Is it basic? Yes. Is it also an introduction? Yes. This is getting redundant, so hopefully I've gotten my point across.
Number 7, Olympus Heights. Instead of rummaging through the derelict houses of random crackheads, now you get to check out the cribs of the ultra-rich and famous. Unlike the MTV show, however, you're just here to steal their shit or blow their head off or whatever. BioShock takes place in 1960, so I suppose Jack beat Charles Manson to the punch by almost a full decade. Much like Apollo Square, Olympus Heights isn't particularly interesting looking, but there's an undeniable nugget of fun in seeing the rooms of everyone you've encountered in the game, post-mortem or not. They say you can tell a lot about a person by their room, but it works both ways. Knowing Fontaine as you do at this point in the game, him having 6 murder turrets in his front yard is about as shocking as a dollar store Electrobolt 1 blast is to an elite bouncer. Sander Cohen is still kicking if you didn't give him a dirt nap back at Fort Frolic, so you can check on him if you're interested in that or claiming the weapon upgrade machine in his bedroom. He's absolutely the most amusing character in the game to me, so more of that guy is always welcome. It's a short, simple level if you know what to do, but I was a lot more entertained by it in this last playthrough than I recall it being in my middle school playthroughs of the game. I regularly see BioShock in discussion for worst late game quality heel turns in gaming alongside Dark Souls 1 and Half-Life, but I really don't think it ever gets awful to the extent that those two do.
Number 6, Neptune's Bounty. Neptune's Bounty is consistently decent from beginning to end. A trend I'm sure you've caught on to is that Alex and I rate visual appeal very highly in BioShock, but it is also a fair point that there's a definite parallel between environmental creativity and an increased variety within that level's design. Neptune's Bounty is the fishing port of Rapture, and this level maximizes that point in its overall aesthetic and layout. I really enjoy how this level invites backtracking, and as a scrounger, I highly recommend searching every corpse and looting as much as you can now. Having a full inventory in the moment makes the higher chances of ammo drops and rare items in the late game almost a useless bonus. That said, the main problem Neptune's Bounty faces is its lack of story relevancy. Of course, your reasoning for showing up at an abandoned, mainly industrial complex is that you were forced to flee the medical pavilion, obviously disregarding that Atlas has your entire course plotted out, but really it feels like more of a dragged out transition between the pavilion and the smuggler's hideout than its own individual entity. By far and away, the main reason I say this is that Neptune's Bounty holds as much story weight as Pol Pot holds positive karma. All you do is obtain the camera. Imagine this from Jack's perspective. Some random guy's been haranguing you to save his entrapped family from the clutches of the evil Andrew Ryan, and just as you reach the final sprint of your marathon, he adds on, hey, by the way, I know my family's about to die, and I don't even really know you, but I need you to pick up a camera. And do what? Stare at your family screaming in agony as I take a fucking picture? I guess so, because clearly Jack is prone to Atlas's simple verbal gestures of kindness, and politely does as he's told like a bloodhound. I'm no storyteller, but each time I play this game, I think being sent straight to the smuggler's hideout with maybe a couple rooms in between might have been an equally solid option. I do appreciate the build-up and payoff that comes with the longevity of Neptune's Bounty, but once again, its irrelevance to the plot and relevance to game playtime, which you even feel as you go through it, nearly kills the momentum the medical pavilion so strongly established. Now, the camera is debatably the single most important tool in the game, which isn't necessarily a specific tie-in to Neptune's Bounty, but on the front of photography, which roughly transitions into artistic vision and creativity, I also feel like almost everything outside of Peaches and the meat locker feels pretty samey. And, fuck it, I'll say it once again, the overall objective just doesn't feel important, more like a Hulu advert between Eric Andre episodes. I really enjoy the final arena for what it's worth, and for those of you unaware, the wrench along with the camera is an ungodly combination that when properly attuned with combat tonics is genuinely unstoppable. Unstoppable. I meant unstoppable, but I cut it short on accident. Plus bonus damage that comes with max research and a beefed up wrench that comes with exploration seriously turns this game into a nifty 50s Doom Eternal sort of experience. Like Atomic Heart if it didn't play like it was designed by a bunch of monkeys. Of course, we're not done yet, and the smuggler's hideout is a pretty crazy experience your first time through. Atlas's family getting blown up like a live leak video right in front of you leaves an incredible dent on your overall quest to take down Ryan, and the mini level serves its purpose well while keeping up the feel of Neptune's Bounty all the same.
Number 5, Point Prometheus. This level was almost great, but unfortunately after the first half it just decided to unhinge its jaw and open wide to guzzle as much piss and shit as possible. The marks of a fantastic level were all there at the start. Becoming a Big Daddy? That's totally awesome. A fun endgame upgrade that uses the world's unique lore to deliver a memorable objective sounds like a recipe for a satisfying finale. And that's what Point Prometheus is, initially at least. Going into all of the specialized research labs and slowly building up your cosplay is just the kind of objective that could have lifted some of the lower ranking levels on this list up from the dregs. It's also a good time in the sense that you're obscenely powerful at this point, with both your guns and plasmids probably being as good as you could hope for. Even if you choose to save the little sisters like 99% of players, the game still force feeds you more Adam than you could possibly care to spend. I don't know why they even bother giving you the choice, especially considering there's no trophy or meta incentive to try being an asshole like in some other games. Do you want $10 for free or $11 if you shoot a 5-year-old in the head? A truly heart-rending ethical dilemma. I like BioShock, don't get me wrong, but I have to admit the story didn't feel nearly as smart or groundbreaking as it did to my 14-year-old self. One thing that is consistent between all my playthroughs though is hating the escort mission part of this level. Look, I'm all for games like this tossing you in combat scenarios in the endgame when you've built up a nest egg of resources, as you may have seen in my System Shock remake video. Unfortunately, the added objective of protecting the little sister bungles it all to hell. Before this point, the level was like a cauldron full of delicious soup, but somebody in the kitchen just couldn't resist sprinkling in a fistful of bugs and sawdust to fuck it up. When you mess up, it's really bizarre how the game plays out also. You don't get an instant death or anything, which would have been too merciful and convenient. Instead, you need to trudge over to another vent and simply dig up a second disposable little sister to give it another whirl. Tenenbaum does acknowledge how weird this is, but it's hard to take seriously if you burn through an entire school bus's worth of 5-year-olds to comparatively little fanfare. I don't hate the second half of this level as much as some people do, but it's definitely a huge step down that does no favors to its overall placement.
Number 4, Medical Pavilion. As much as I berated Welcome to Rapture for losing its luster as you repeat it over and over, the Medical Pavilion has an almost opposite effect. Even though it's only number 4 on our list, I'd confidently place it among the elites of first levels in gaming. In terms of aesthetic and ambiance, it is incredible, and on the gameplay and exploration front, it is beyond innovative. BioShock has the feel of a well-made first-person immersive horror experience at times, and the pinnacle of that aspect of the game comes in the medical bay. This is entirely thanks to Dr. Steinman, and taken even further by using the creepy doctor trope over the course of an entire complex. I recommended complete exploration in the Neptune's Bounty segment because it was earlier in the video, but here is where it's most obviously a beneficial strategy. I don't know if you can get to Dr. Steinman before you unlock the shotgun, but having both Incinerate and the shotgun instead of just the machine gun makes it a rather uninspiring major enemy encounter. Imagine you fought Baldur the first time around, but with the Blade of Olympus. Moving on from the good doctor, the Medical Pavilion's strongest characteristic far and away is its environment. The pavilion is full of off-putting posters and audio logs that give direct insight into Dr. Steinman's surprisingly modernistically pertinent view on beauty, and the level as a whole is filled with remarkable variety. Eternal Flame, where you unlock the Incinerate plasmid, remains one of the most memorable individual rooms in any game ever for me. You unlock the plasmid by sliding a rotting corpse, which you first think could very well be a living splicer, into a cremator. After it pops back out with a bottle of Sunny D, you immediately are put to the test, but the creative mind figures out the utility of it ranges from burning oil to canisters and even splicers. The Medical Pavilion thrives in its elemental simplicity, but there's a clear dedication to maximum memorability in every single segment. I also really enjoy how the pavilion unlocks itself through Incinerate and Telekinesis both. Being able to test out the plasmids in combat and exploration instead of solely combat, which like every single fucking plasmid besides these two are used for, left a fantastic lasting impression. Even through all of the Steinman talk and horror and so on, the Medical Pavilion's most pivotal moment will forever be the little sister. I've gone to the dark side of the moon and done a harvest run before, rest me now, and I can confirm there is no point in doing it unless you've got a thing for shame and self-agony. I don't really figure how anyone, even those with the most blackened hearts tainted by the most evil of souls, can watch this play out and still choose to murder them for marginal personal benefit, even disregarding curiosity. Simply put, you're just a fucked up person if you take this route. You think checking out Divine Comedy or The Wasp Factory gets you on the FBI's watch list? Think again, because the answer is sitting right here in front of you. Just press square and feel your world melt as you enter the dominion of mental instability that comes along with the conscious decision to murder a slave child for personal benefit. Yeah, I can say all that, because I did all that, motherfucker. I'm like Rambo, if his imprisonment was justified. The Medical Pavilion is just a quality level from beginning to end, and establishes the pace and feel of BioShock for the remainder of the Atlas storyline.
Number 3, Hephaestus. Much like my other favorite missions, the clear objective of building a bomb ties this level together with a cool destructive end goal, not the least hindered by it also being the level where you kill Andrew Ryan. His death speech remains one of the most badass moments in gaming history. You beat him to death with a golf club, which in most cases would be cause for a humiliating Team Fortress 2-esque death, and he still comes out on top thanks to that speech. Staying stone fucking cold through a prolonged beating of that severity takes a will of iron. Though he may not be a guy I'd want to be in charge of anything within 2 degrees of connection to my livelihood, I gotta respect taking death on the chin and bitching your killer like that. As a whole, this level feels underrated to me. I always see our top 2 talked about, but this one seems to place in the middle for people for whatever reason, despite in my opinion being of similar quality. The environment is awesome. The steam and lava-filled industrial labyrinth full of booby traps and thugs is intense stuff. If it weren't like 5 hours deep into the game, it could have maybe even fooled me into thinking I really was at the final level. The bomb assembly is done with the guidance of audio logs from past anti-Ryan conspirators who give you the recipe and locations of the components. If you've ever cooked a meal with HelloFresh, it's sort of like that but for terrorism, and they never twist your arm into using sour cream at any point in the process. Unfortunately, Hephaestus is roughly the point where the game stops introducing new stuff in the forms of plasmids or enemies, so the combat starts to flag a little bit. You won't notice it here in a first playthrough because it's still a pretty fun level, but it's there. You have a ridiculous amount of Atom, as I said, and nothing interesting to spend it on beyond upgrades of things you already have or stupid useless bullshit nobody would ever use. Find me the person on Earth who sat down at a gene bank, unequipped Electrobolt, and decided to put Sonic Boom in there. There is just no way. Feel free to email video proof of this happening to cytonoxyt@gmail.com if you ever find any. I'm calling bullshit, it's like a Bigfoot sighting. Anyways, if I wasn't clear earlier, this is a strong level. The combination of satisfaction and dread you feel when killing Ryan is a hard to replicate or induce feeling, so I give the game props on that front.
Number 2, Arcadia. For me, Arcadia was the best level in the game. It's similar to Neptune's Bounty in that it's sort of 2 levels in one, but has much more story importance, and the objective of the level is equally more valid. Number 2 versus number 6. I'd argue it's more environmentally appealing and diverse than our number 1 level, and is also a brilliantly composed change in pace from the smuggler's hideout immediately before it, but I digress. By this point, my wrench and camera hack really starts to evolve, and you can see it in any given segment in which I engage with splicers. 2 hits, 3 hits, dead. You also care to notice that I almost instinctively pull out my camera every time I see a splicer, turret, bot, Big Daddy, fucking bug, plant, I don't know, whatever it may be, because seriously, the benefits are incomparable. For example, did you know that at maximum research level, you can hack turrets and security bots by just pressing square? Also, you unlock a multitude of useful tonics from research, including Wrench Jockey 2 after the 4th tier of Bouncer research, which, when combined with Wrench Jockey, increases damage by 350%. Add that with Sport Boost and Sport Boost 2, and it's like going to war with nukes and aircraft carriers against a nation of Stone Age Neanderthals. It's fairly hard to summarize Arcadia in a couple of sentences because it really is just beaming with personality through and through, and there's not one moment of sudden dullness or over-the-top extravaganza. It's very consistent, and the level is so great because it makes you think, makes you fight, and makes you explore like none other, except for one other evidently, but it really is in just a different class alongside Fort Frolic for both of us. The Farmer's Market is debatably a slight drop from the preceding Arcadia, but it's so short and such a minor decrease in quality that stems entirely from tight spacing in my mind that I don't really pay it much negative attention. I'm also a huge fan of the almost tower defense type segment to close out the level in Langford's Labs, as well as the Beehive and just the whole item discovery objective that is the second half of Arcadia. Even though Hephaestus also took this route, Arcadia's was simply a better variation on it. The entire level just feels so alive in that it is literally a living garden, but also the enemy placements and fairly generous number of turrets and cameras that you can use to your advantage. The obvious break from the gardens to the living quarters also gives it a secondary level of livelihood, and of all the levels in the game, this was easily the most enjoyable to shamelessly loot corpses from. Arcadia remains to this day one of the great single levels in FPS history, and will likely stay in that group for the far future.
Number 1, Fort Frolic. Fort Frolic is a center of the fine arts run by Sander Cohen, a demented psychopath gifted in sculpting and musical performance. All the best creative minds are a little nutso when you get down to it, I suppose. How else do you think Jack and I have been crafting all these masterpiece videos of ours? Anyways, he's got a pretty nice thing going on here. Slot machines are present at the start of the level for those gambling addicts among you, and once you pop into the main plaza, you're treated to some groundbreaking avant-garde artwork to gawk at. Your task, as given by self-appointed mentor Cohen, is to find all of his past disciples and kill them so they can be covered in plaster for some reason. Throughout this manhunt of yours, you come face to face with normal enemies, the targets themselves, and even goons sent by Cohen to kill you during one of his manic schizo rage fits. It definitely does not inspire great confidence in his loyalty to you, so the whole time you're probably thinking about how you'll off the big man once he finishes his magnum opus sculpture. Funnily enough, you actually can spare him, as I mentioned earlier, and it turns out to be to your benefit. Don't worry, you still get the chance to blow his brains out before the game is done, just a little later. Weirdly enough, one of the primary goals of this level, according to someone who worked on the game, was to make the player question whether Cohen deserved to die when his mental state is this screwy. I think in that regard they sort of failed, because he's so obviously a nut that he's just a danger to everyone else around him. Save the tearjerkers for a chump dumber than me. Eat lead. The map design feels both expansive and easy to navigate, so it avoids the common pitfall of pacing being brought to a screeching halt by time spent wandering around looking for what the hell you do next. This area is pretty light on the lore, with little going on story-wise save for the reveal of Jack's prodigious parentage, but it gives him the freedom to create a more or less self-contained level based around being fun and memorable, similar to Arcadia. I cannot fathom anyone placing Fort Frolic lower than like number 3 on their list. It just leaps and bounds beyond to me.
Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. We'll probably cover the other games in the series at some point in the future, so stay tuned for those if you're a fan of this video. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, send this video to your entire extended family, and subscribe to our Patreon and all that stuff. Anyways, that's all for now. Deuces.